Like and subscribe right now, or else this will be in your bed tonight. r/ask Reddit by Planet Reddit. Teachers of Reddit, what's your most memorable oh boy, that student definitely isn't going places moment? A university freshman turned in a paper on the Treaty of Versailles that conformed to no known formatting system I had ever seen. There didn't even seem to be paragraphs, assuming that his computer had jumbled it up somehow when he turned it in. I went to give it back to him in class one day so he could fix it. He informed me it was intentional. The format meant the paper was to be read as a rap, which he proceeded to do for me in the few minutes before class started. It was incredible. D+. He probably saw Hamilton and somehow assumed that meant rap was a viable form of history writing in academia. Was it at least a good rap? In terms of flow, yes. In terms of accurate information in an understandable order, no. Great student though. Got a B+ in the class. My senior English class in high school had two guys that did a rap of Macbeth as a part of their final project. Teacher was impressed enough to give them both full letter grade increases for their final class grade. Sadly, smartphones weren't really a thing then, so no recordings. As a getting to know you activity, I asked students if you could be anyone in history, who would you be and why? One student's answer, Eleanor Roosevelt, because I've always wanted to be black. I think this one is my favorite. No fucking way, that kid's going places, the wrong ones. A couple years later I was buying gas after school and the same student saw me, ran over and squealed, guess what? I'm pregnant. Then she ran away. I looked over at the person she was with and said, was she kidding? The woman said, I wish she were. It was the future baby's paternal grandmother. Not a teacher but a fellow classmate. The least intelligent member of my geography class stole my homework abandonment from my bag and tried to hand it in as his own. I told the teacher after class and she looked through the pile and said, don't worry, he didn't even attempt to remove my name from the paper. He basically just handed my homework in for me. And that's how he will never be caught even if accused. The perfect crime. That's actually pretty smart. Now the teacher knows he did hand in his work, but cannot find his work. This way, he gets more time to hand it in, or accuses the teacher of losing his work for a decent mark. He is just 2 steps ahead. Till OP told the teacher. That's some 4D chess, right there. I hindered students to do a group presentation of a story from mythology at the end of the school year. I told them they could choose Greek, Roman, Egyptian, Norse, or any other system they chose. 2 students chose a story from Norse mythology about Thor. They presented the story, which included characters like Loki, Captain America, Iron Man, etc. completely seriously. I spoke to them at the end of class and they had no clue that the Marvel Cinematic Universe was not a part of Norse mythology. They should have said it was on American mythology. After years of this trope, tvtropes.org link. To be fair, Loki is a part of Norse mythology. In the last few weeks before the AP exam, I give my classes a series of practice tests, written by College Board, to take in class under a time constraints to give them practice. One student, let's call him Bill, always tried to cheat in my class. I had gotten sick of putting in the effort to catch him. And it didn't matter because the entire point of the class was to prepare for the AP exam. Bill started off each test by staring at the page and answering 1 or 2 questions. Then, as always, he asked to go to the bathroom during the test. I let him go and he took his phone, of course. He returns and frantically bubbles in the rest of the test and turns it in early. I have to hand it to him. Bill was great at memorizing letters for the answers of the practice tests, but he failed the AP exam. Did he not understand that this was for practice? He was practicing his cheating for the real test. Someone should have told him there are no bathroom breaks in those exams. Okay, so I had a student in middle school that couldn't read. That wasn't a huge deal. Kid had issues. Once he got angry at me and told me he was going to rip off my buttons. It may have been literal or figurative. Didn't matter. Remember, issues. It was my job to teach him to read. He should have already been in high school. He was 14 and in middle school. I worked individually with this kid, every day. Finally I just asked him what he was going to do for a living if he couldn't read and wouldn't try. He gave me a pretty standard answer. I'll play basketball or sell drugs. I should mention he was barely over 5 foot tall. I worried about him. He was my student for 2 years. Eventually he moved on and I switched to high school. So 20 years later I get curious. I remember most of my students and this kid had a name that stood out a bit. I Google his name hoping he won't be in prison. A lot of my former students are. I find him right away. He's a professional basketball player for Ukraine. Retired now but still, so good for him. Made himself proud. Quick edit. He turned 15 in middle school. He did learn how to read. He graduated and went to college. Apparently he struggled for a while, but he's human. His history was not ideal. I'm concerned about naming him because of his privacy. He played from 2006 to 2010. Cool. Gold. My father wasn't sure if I should go into education. Finally paying off. Unexpected happy ending. One of the fellas in my university first year computer programming class stared at the wall. At the same spot. The whole class. Every class. He'd walk in on time. Sit down. Open his folder. And stare at the wall. And didn't ever take a note that I saw. At the end of the wall staring duration of the class. He'd close his likely still blank folder. Get up. And leave without a word. I see him from time to time at the grocery store collecting up the cards. I feel a little bad for whoever funded his education. But I'm pleased that he has a steady job. Oh, I had some classmates like this in college. There was one guy who just completely failed to grasp basic behind networking concepts. Like, I had to help him set a static IP on a computer once and it was a whole ordeal. Mind you, this was not an introductory class. Later on, he managed to get his security plus. Bragged all the time about how he got a perfect score on it. When you asked how he studied for it, he replied, I used Big League. That may not be the actual name since it's been a few years, but the program he referenced is a brain dump program. He just memorized the answers and then took the test. This became very apparent when you started actually asking him firewall questions. Had no fucking clue. How he managed to get a job in IT is beyond my understanding. How he managed to get a job in IT is beyond my understanding. I've seen this fairly frequently and can weigh in on it. Usually it's one of 4 things. Nepotism or sucking up huge time of some sort. They're good looking and were hired for, a third hindrance. They're working for a small company that doesn't know any better. And end up being little IT tin pot dictators that can somehow end up keeping their job as it grows because the company doesn't know any better. Skipping from job to job at extremely high frequency, and this is why we are careful to check references thoroughly. They're working for a small company that doesn't know any better, and end up being little IT tin pot dictators that can somehow end up keeping their job as it grows because the company doesn't know any better. My wife worked for a place with a guy like this. He was the Ms. Exchange administrator, and he was grossly incompetent at his job but was able to techno-babble his way past senior management, who were not technically competent themselves and so had no idea if what he was saying was true. My 8th grade physical science lab partner took the top off one of those oil burners, poured the oil all over our desk and then lit it on fire, like on purpose. Did you think it would be less flammable because it's on the table now? Hilariously, even though I was the one who put the fire out and had nothing to do with lighting it, I still got suspended too. I guess the lesson I was supposed to learn was never help put out a fire. The zero tolerance policy strikes again. Think of the danger that we've now prevented. All you kids gotta do is stand tall, arms akimbo, and say, halt fire. You're not going to bully me. It's easy. Not a teacher but a fellow student. A guy in my class was asked by the German teacher what kind of music he listens to, trying to make a good impression. He said he liked classical music. The teacher asked him to name his favorite composer. He answered piano. Ludwig von Piano. Here's one from my mom. The class ate at one of those medieval themed restaurants on a field trip and one little brat took advantage of the setting and the overflowing cleavage. He referred to the waitress as his wench and demanded she butter his bread. Also she would bend over to better reveal her bountiful bosom. He ordered the turkey legs then wielded them theatrically like Henry VIII, while thanking the waitress for giving him a bone. When my mom got home, she said he was a sexual harassment lawsuit waiting to happen. I'm betting that kid's family is a real piece of work. I went to school, lived next door to a boy like that. His family was a mess. His dad always would harass local women, etc. Not to take things to a dark place, but the boy and his older brother both later wound up in jail for rape. He ordered the turkey legs, then wielded them theatrically like Henry VIII. This is the only part of this story that I condone. Join our community Discord, link in description. I had my students write 2 truths and a lie so the class could get to know one another better. One student writes, I had 4 concussions, I play hockey, I have gold. He said that the lie is that he has gold. I told our phys ed teacher about it at lunch and she says, what does he mean he has gold? I said, well, that was the lie. Well then he lied twice, because he's had 7 concussions, no wonder he's so slow. I mean he has had 4 concussions. 4 is a subset of 7. Making both statements true. He just can't go over 7 without making it false. If I have $1 million, saying I have $1 is entirely true. I used to do a lot of drugs. I still do. But I used to too. I'm not gonna lie, that kid's future is act. For every concussion he probably took 5 more less severe hits. Unfortunately he is a prime candidate for CTE. 3 third grade boys stole their answer book from me for their reading test, which consisted of 18 multiple choice questions and 2 essay questions. They all aced the multiple choice questions but had the exact same answers on the essay questions. Student answers may vary. Well, it did say may. Not a teacher but someone in my class genuinely believed that the Great Wall of China was in Berlin. Took everyone a couple minutes to realize she was being dead serious. I mean, I can sort of see how she might have gotten there. Berlin Wall, Great Wall of China. I'd say as a young child her brain just sort of defined the 2 terms as the same thing, and she just never stopped to think critically of it again. Mr. Gorbachev, tear down the Great Wall of China. Great way to suddenly start another war. This isn't really the kid's fault, more the parents, but my sister teaches in Hong Kong. Generally 3-4 year olds, and she had this one kid, called Enzo if I remember right, kept acting out, completely ignoring my sister and her tay when they spoke to him, and doing badly in the classwork they're given. He also didn't speak, like, at all, tended to play by himself. So my sister called in his parents and to discuss it, voiced her concerns that there might be behavioral problems, maybe something deeper seated. His parents then confided in her that it's probably not that, more that the kid didn't speak a lick of English or Cantonese, that is, the 2 languages used in the school, and most of Hong Kong. They were both relatively affluent Italians, so they'd raised the kid speaking Italian, and lied that he spoke English fluently so he could get admitted into the school, as it was a requirement that they have a basic understanding. If I recall correctly, my sister raised her concerns with the principal after she had the meeting, and they responded to just moving the kid to another class. She said she still sees him sitting alone during lunch breaks. I really feel for the kid though. He's only young, and he's pretty much been alienated, and won't learn properly because his parents are so dead set on shoving him into the most expensive school. Behinduming he'll learn well. Ex-Scout Sludder here, Cubs. While your story is a lot more heart-wrenching, I think, I had a similar problem with one of the kids in my group. He had recently moved to my country from France, and had enrolled with our Scouts group shortly after. Kid kept acting up, refused to join in with games, would suddenly get really quiet and wander off, etc etc. We tried speaking to him in both my native language and English. We were a fairly international bunch, and a lot of the kids spoke English as a second language also. This particular kid's mom spoke English quite well, so we expected similar from her son. Nothing seemed to work. We ended up calling in the parents for a talk, since we were worried, and this is where we found out that 1. This kid had anxiety issues in groups. 2. Only spoke French, and 3. Was enrolled in a French school where they didn't teach English or NL, and of course they spoke solely in French at home. It was ridiculous. Apparently the parents of which, bonus, only mammon spoke anything other than French had hoped that by thrusting him into our group without saying anything about the aforementioned issues, he'd pick up the language more quickly by necessity. We ended up solving most of the problem by making me his main communicator, since I was the only one who could so much as order a sandwich in French, and letting him watch the games first before we let him join in. so he would understand our explanations of the games better. Turns out that he was a smart kid, and together with some help from the other kids, the one time they banded together to wreak anything other than utter havoc, he ended up learning words and phrases in English and NL quite quickly. His favorite phrase? He cheated. There's a reason there are second language classes, though. Yes, to a point. Kids can pick things up out of necessity, but having someone working with them is huge, and it gets around this issue of shy kids or whatever who won't make an attempt to get someone's attention and indicate that they don't know what's going on. I was probably like that in school with school subjects. My best friend as a kid was from Taiwan. She came here knowing basically her name. Yes, no, hello. When asked where she was from, she could point to Taiwan on the map. That was it. A year later, the two of us are best friends and chatting away, thanks to a really excellent ESL program in the school, and a teacher she adored. Kindergarten teacher, testing students on community helpers, asked a student to name 3 community helpers. Child responds, firefighter man. Now I really thought, yes, she's got this in the bag. A hot dog, and a monkey. Yep, no. Kiss your brain though. As a firefighter, I have several colleagues who I would gladly exchange for a trained monkey. I don't fight fires, but I have had colleagues I would exchange for a hot dog. This one made me laugh out loud. I would love to know the thought process that came up with hot dog. Used to teach English in Japan. Had a 12-year-old kid who would take off his socks and chew on his toenails in the middle of my lessons. Had a 4-year-old kid who would run at top speed toward the wall, throw himself into it, stumble around going ouch, for a few seconds, then do it all again, for an hour straight if we would let him. Had a 7-year-old who stripped off down to his underpants, then skipped around the room singing the Pokemon theme song for the whole class. Finally got him dressed again just as the lesson ended. He looked up at me and said in complete seriousness, "Sensei, I did a good job. Kids, man, they're weird." Edit. Obligatory domo arigato for the gold. Kind stranger. My very first. : Did the 7-year-old at least sing the Pokemon theme song in English? LOL. I wish. To be fair, the 4-year-old sounds completely normal. Asked my student, 7th grade life science, why he has F's in all of his classes and why he doesn't bother to care about it. He proceeds to tell me with the most confident smile that he's making it into the NBA. That kid is now LeBron James. Edit. I'm not implying that LeBron is stupid. I'm not into NBA and I'm not even American. He was just the first that came to my mind when I was thinking about a famous NBA player. LeBron James was apparently a decent student in high school. Not fantastic, but decent. 3.0 GPA or thereabouts. Been a history teacher for 3 months and was teaching about the middle colonies and how it was the breadbasket of America. The next day as a warm-up I ask what the breadbasket is. She rose her hand and without her even skipping a beat starts going off about how I'm so dumb because it's called the chicken basket where you get your tenders 2 sides and it also comes with bread, but that isn't what it's called. This poor girl has a lot more stories. This one is the one that stands out to me the most. Edit. Sorry guys, took a nap because I'm trying to enjoy my vacation. Other stories include wondering how Obama was the first black president because she thought Abraham Lincoln was black. Her reasoning behind it was that was really tall. Granted, she's also black yet. Along with that, I've had to explain that we did have color back then. She couldn't believe that people before the 1950s still had color, as only the TVs and photos were black and white. She constantly calls people cockatoos. 3 weeks ago she asked which history I'm teaching. I honestly don't know if I really suck as a teacher or it's her. I thought it was the Great American Melting Pot. You're such an idiot. The Great American Melting Pot is a special at Denny's where they pour scalding hot gravy over a grand slam. More stories? Please. D. My sister is a teacher for a local school. Like a great many teachers, she's also responsible for a form group, in this case, a rowdy and rambunctious group of 15-year-olds she'd inherited from a newly retired teacher. Some kids stand out more than others, and not always for the right reasons. The epitome of that rule existed in my sister's form group. She had the misfortune to be called Xena by her Tumblr feminist mother, and Xena herself had followed firmly in her mother's footsteps. She was considered unpopular, and certainly the other kids were unfair and cruel. But she didn't help matters herself. My sister has told many stories of Xena, up to and including the time she spontaneously began speaking in an accent, which sounded like the bastard child of a Pakistani accent, Irish, and a speech impediment. The accent vanished as mysteriously as it had appeared over the course of the lunch hour. The time she claimed powers of clairvoyance in chemistry. The kid torching pencils with a Bunsen burner apparently never particularly cared if their great aunt Doreen wanted to warn them of misfortune. The time she shaved her head and refused to wear her uniform because it was stifling her creativity. My sister was running improvisation drills when Xena broke in with one of her prime stories. She was the daughter of a Mauritian man named Jonathan. She said her skin was the color of milk, smooth and pale, a man of great importance. She'd been born in Mauritius and swiftly smuggled over to the UK with her mother. Born and raised in England as a newborn. There was a beat of stunned, awkward silence, until a particular shit of a child screeched, "June Cena," and slammed his mate's head into the desk. Half of the staff were convinced that John Cena was a politician. Wait a decade, Honestly, it'd be one of the better candidates we've had. He is really charismatic and funny. When he cameos in a movie, a lot of the time he's the best part of the movie, like in Trainwreck. He was hilarious in that otherwise bad movie. Not a teacher, but I work as a bouncer, and on Saturday some girl was persistently trying to get into my bar but looked young and didn't have it with her. After telling her no about 30 times and her complaining about everyone hating on her, a guy walked in and told us he's one of her high school teachers and that she's 17. She took off awfully quick when he showed up, and I can only imagine how things went in school today. Thanks for watching. Subscribe for 3 videos a day.